Congressman, let's go to Panama City, Florida. Joanne, you're on the air.
Hi, this is Joanne. I'm an 80-year-old retired school teacher and a lifelong Democrat who would love to see Ron Paul really, really make progress.
Are you sure he wants to blow up the Department of Education? He's anti-abortion?
Now, you come to my first question, and that is, so much emphasis has been put on his attitude toward foreign policy, and I agree so wholeheartedly that my first question is, what else does he believe in? Obviously, I'm going to have to start doing some research. But it's important for me to say to other Democrats that right now the greatest danger to our nation is its imperialistic attitude toward the entire world.
But if you see the rest of his platform, it may singe your eyebrows a little bit, Joanne. Hang on, and we'll look at it with him. Let me get one more call first from Boston. Sean, you're on the air.
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
All right, what do you think?
Basically, that woman just stole my thunder. Unfortunately, I wanted to say that as a rational man, I agree with his policy towards the war, but there are a lot of other things that a president needs to deal with. And as a Democrat, I guess we are sort of big government, and to do away with the Department of Energy and the Department of Education and whatnot. My fear would be, well, who's going to take? I want to know what his opinion is as to who's going to take over those responsibilities. The bureaucracy is rather huge and kind of cumbersome, but it does serve a purpose. And without those, who's going to fill that void?
Sean and Joanne will pick those up. Congressman, what about it? You say no Department of Education, no Department of Homeland Security, no Department of Energy, no to abortion, no to gun control. No to immigration reform. You are Dr. No.
Well, I'm Dr. Yes for the Constitution. I'm Dr. Yes for liberty. So I can defend each one of those. I can't go through all 5 of those here in a couple minutes. But I approach all those positions through the Constitution because it's the only oath I take. So I see no place in the Constitution for the Department of Education. I also see that it's not doing a very good job. The Department of Education now is not a friend of the teachers. Currently, I have a lot of young teachers who are very, very annoyed with No Child Left Behind, national testing of teachers, and the whole interference and the dictation toward books. So the teachers are turning against federal control of education. They thought it was a way to get more money and higher salaries, but it was meant to be local. Whether it's the abortion issue, yes, I'm pro-life. I'm an OB doctor, and I cannot stand the idea that somebody would pay me to kill a baby that's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 pounds, and that's legal. And yet, if the baby is born and you kill the baby, you are charged with murder. But once again, I'm not looking for a federal police force. That's a state function. It's a difficult problem, and it should be worked out elsewhere. And that's the magnificence of the Constitution, is the more difficult the problem, the less government you should have, the less federal government you should have, and it should be worked out locally.
But in the last decade, we seem to be facing a lot of areas in which government cutbacks leave us wondering how the society is going to work. Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans seemed like Exhibit A. We had a huge disaster, and the government seemed unable to respond even when it should, even when it seemed very apparently needed. What's the lesson there to you?
The message is loud and clear that's my point. The more money you give them, the more bureaucracy you have, and the less efficient they are. It is a beautiful point. What did they do? They went out and they said, they need homes. Well, we'll buy 500 trailers. But they never got to the people. And yet, if you look back before we had FEMA and all this big government, in 1900 we had our worst hurricane, and Galveston was wiped off the map. And they rebuilt without the federal government. They built a seawall that still exists. You have more money and less bureaucracy if you approach it locally. You don't have less money. And what do? And you have to mix this in with what's happening in Iraq. When you need a National Guard to help preserve order in a particular state, we find out they're in Iraq, and that we don't have the money. And it is true that some of these things domestically, and I mentioned earlier in the show that I would work out transitions to help people, even though in theory we might not need them or should have them and there are better ways. That's not my attack. My attack really is to make the point about liberty and the Constitution and stop the war, tide people over if they're in need.